Morning. This is Sweetie Berry with the Women of Dare Whimsy. We're a community of gifted and creative women who come together each week to have a conversation about a current topic or about one that's true for us as parents, as individuals, as workers, as sisters, as friends. This week we're talking about how to raise the gifted girl and what it was like to be raised as a gifted girl. Not all of us have physically birthed children, but we are all in the process of growing each other. So this week we hope you'll join us and share in the conversation as we consider what is it like to grow up a gifted girl, to raise one, and to be one, and how does that affect how they're raised and how they perceive the world. I know for me personally, I really didn't grow up knowing I was a quote-unquote gifted girl. I grew up knowing I was creative, but I had two super bright brothers, and those brothers to me seemed like they were so much faster and smarter and more ability than I was. I almost felt like the dumber of our family, but that was okay in our rural town because everybody had a place. But as I grew up, I learned that not everybody could think as fast as even I could, and not everybody could see the creative answers that I could see that were presented. So I had to learn perceptually that we're all different and we all see things differently. And I was fortunate that I was around a community that accepted me for who I was and as I was and helped me become who I could be. Good morning. I'm so glad to see that we have Sarah L. Cook and Gail Roddy and Dr. Edith Johnston and Bobby Smith Gorman with us today. All four of those ladies are amazing gifted women. They're all entrepreneurs. They're all well able to share in the conversation of what it's like to grow up gifted. Good morning, ladies. Everybody's muted. Joke's on me. All right.
Good morning, sweetie.
Good morning. Stay muted for just a minute. I'd appreciate it. It's so good to be here with you today. Let me start off with Miss Bobby and Bobby Gorman. I love to hear you talk about being gifted because I don't think you truly knew you were gifted for about 40 years in that space, but heaven knows you're a high creative and high ability person. So good morning. You work with a lot of children. You work with a lot of women in ministry and women at the university level. What do you see that's different about gifted girls?
Well, good morning, sweetie. I always used to tell people that I was from the Island of Misfit Toys from one of my favorite Christmas programs, because I never really seemed to fit in. And that's what I see now in the other women and girls that I see and that I teach and that I work with, is that a lot of times if we don't know that we're gifted, we just know that we're different and that we don't fit in with everyone else. It takes maybe sometimes someone like you, sweetie, going, hey, don't you know you're gifted, for it to kind of sink in and go, oh, well, I just always thought that I was weird or that I wasn't like everybody else. I didn't realize that there were other people like me because I didn't grow up in a community where there were a lot of people that really acted like I did or that thought like I did or that were like me. So that's the one thing that I've really noticed, is that in working with all these gifted ladies that don't know that they are, it's a matter of figuring out what it is that they are. I know now that I'm the very creative, very able to teach, very able to work with other people. But when I was growing up, you were supposed to be a little cookie cutter person, and you were supposed to be fitting in with everyone else. And now that I know that gifted girls were meant to stand out, then it's my job now to help people recognize it and empower themselves. Sarah Cook, I'm going to pass it to you now so you can talk about it.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here this morning. Growing up as a gifted girl, same thing like Sweetie talked about. I didn't really see myself gifted. Bobby shared that same thing. I was put in gifted classes in the small little town that we had, but mostly they were just extra art lessons and more creativity. And then when I went into high school in the gifted program, it was sometimes a lot more work. And I never felt like I was the smart one. I always felt like there were other people smarter than me. And my brother, and in fact, he always got his homework done so much faster than me. So I kind of felt really dumb. However, being in those gifted programs allowed me to see that there were other people who were creative. There were other people that wanted to excel. There were other people that wanted to learn because learning was awesome and not just to do the homework because that was the assignment made. So for me, growing up gifted meant that I had opportunities to do some really wonderful things that most kids wouldn't have had the opportunity to do because I was exposed to extra programs, which was phenomenal. The other thing that I found growing up gifted was that I excelled and drove myself so hard that sometimes I kind of burnt myself out. And I was very grateful to have had a mother who said, hey, I think you need an R&R a day, and didn't push me to go to school every single solitary day, because she could sense that I needed some rejuvenation time. I was great with people, but I really needed refueling on a private level. And so she could sense when I was burning out and would encourage me to take that rest and relaxation day. And I would stay home and I would, watch a movie, or I would read books, or I would color, or I would organize. And that allowed me to really excel in lots of different areas of my life, but also have that time to recharge. And so now that I have my own daughter that I'm raising, I have done the same thing for her. And so I call boundaries when she's like, well, I really want to go to this thing. I really want to do this. I really want to do this. And sometimes they say, I think you need to stay home and just paint. Or I think you need to sleep in tomorrow. Or I think you need to stay home and, have a, rest and relaxation day. And I know that that's been very key for her success, because she is a 4.0 student for many, many years, and she is writing cookbooks, and she is doing all these different things, but she's also been able to have an amazing life full of wonderful activities and balance, because we've helped to hold those boundaries for her. So how about you, Gail? What do you have to share?
Thank you, Sarah, and hello, everyone, sweetie, and all the other Women of Dare Whimsy and our audience that's watching us now and later. I've been listening to everything everyone says, and boy, it sure brings up lots of thoughts and memories of childhood, especially, as Sweetie said, being a child, you didn't even know that you were gifted unless you were put in specifically gifted programs. I think it's kind of hard as a 9, 10-year-old to even know that. And I didn't discover that I was gifted until just a few years ago. But one thing I do realize now is that there are so many different ways to be creative and gifted. I wasn't the most academically bright child. It wasn't because things were that difficult. I just wasn't that academically sharp as far as getting all A's and even striving for all A's. But as I look back now, I guess my leadership qualities were very strong. I remember being in the 3rd grade, and one day the teacher said, Gail, I'll start on this side of the room. Would you start on the other side of the room? And we are going to go around with every child and help them with their reading. Now I'm 10 years old, and the teacher asked me to be her assistant in the classroom. And I did it. I didn't think anything of it because I knew that I could do that. You were supposed to do what the teacher asked you to do, and so I did it. So I have come to learn that sometimes having leadership qualities, the ability to work well with people, to make people feel comfortable with whatever you're presenting. I don't recall any sense of jealousy among the kids. Well, she's teacher's pet. I don't remember getting any flack about that, and you think there would be. I simply got up and did what I was asked, which was to help to teach the reading that particular hour. And so in my work with girls, especially over the last 20 years, I've come to really look at that, to see how giftedness takes so many forms that sometimes society doesn't really even recognize, but that we have. And if there's just someone who looks at that and sees that giftedness and helps to bring it out in the girl, it can make her world so much better. I didn't look at that as giftedness. I've simply looked at that as, this is who I am. Now, over the years, I've developed a love-hate relationship. As you get older, you start feeling all those pangs of insecurity, and how are people viewing me? Are they putting me down because I have these talents? So, as I'm sure with many of us can say the same thing, is that you kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. You recognize your talents, you appreciate them, but there's also that downside that makes you think, wow, people aren't going to like me. And then as women, of course, if you're a heterosexual woman, you get that thing where you're not going to get a husband. You're probably not even going to get a boyfriend if you're too smart, if you're too gifted. So there was that piece in there too. So it's all fascinating. And Dr. Edith, I bet you can bring us some more insight into that of being a young girl and being in the classroom and being asked to lead, and how strange and wonderful a phenomenon that might be for a gifted girl.
Thanks, Gail, and hello, everyone. It's great to be with you all this morning. And yeah, as a gifted girl, now that we've identified that, multi-talented, smart, intelligent, all those words that many a times we'll shy away from, I didn't even realize it or identify it with those vocabulary. Part of it was that my experiences is that about every 18 months, I changed schools. So what happened was the teacher and the parents didn't know what to do with me. So they would either give me that extra work, and repetition is not our best way to learn as people that access information fairly easily. Then there was, of course, at 5th grade, they didn't know what I was going to do, what they were going to do with me. So, like Gail was saying, I was placed in a leadership role, but mine it was an assistant, but in the sense that, here's the math lesson for today, you get to teach it, Edith. So here I am as a 5th grader, out in front of my classmates. I didn't think anything about it. I knew it. I knew how to explain it. I just did it like Gail said. At that level, at that time, no problems. My peers and I don't have any recollection of antagonism or disappointment or jealousy by my peers at that particular time. Now, if we go on down the track here and get into high school, and you have to stop and think, I'm a military dependent jumping around to different schools, I end up in what's labeled as a civilian school because I'm staying on a military base going to a civilian school. And so therefore I'm already different because I'm an outsider coming into a small community school. On top of that, I'm a sophomore and I'm in the junior-senior physics class. Small, rural Kansas school, physics class, yeah, 90% of that class was male. So here I am, female, military, and one, pardon my French, smartass, in the physics class with all these guys. That was a challenge because at that time there was concerns and interactions that were harder for me to deal with. I am at that time, as Gail was saying, considering, well, which one of these boys would I like to have take me to the dance? How am I going to approach them? First, they're older than I am, which is always a thrill for a younger lady, teenager. But I'm also being looked at, well, you can do my homework, or why don't you help me on this test? And one of the things I did do at that point in time, even though I was unsure, uncertain, wanting to dumb down, not getting straight A's because that was too smart, yet I was teaching as far as, mentoring and tutoring my fellow students. But I was also very deliberate in the sense that if they were trying to be pushy about me not helping them with their homework but doing their homework, I got rather verbal and rather standoffish then. Then I was different for sure because I wouldn't do it. I tore one gentleman's papers up and threw them on the floor for him and walked out. So I think the experiences for me as growing up, gifted, first of all, didn't impact me until I got toward the high school. It was also the fact that I was the eldest of 7 children, so leadership roles and taking on responsibilities, I just thought that was my job. As I've gone on, watched my sons grow up, not daughters this time, but still then beginning in the gifted community, I come back to what some of the other ladies have said, is that I'm aware that dumbing down, not fitting in, feeling uncomfortable, not recognizing our gifts, not recognizing the variety of gifts and how important that is, how important it is to encourage us, how important of us to go ahead and stand out and let ourselves shine. Go ahead and blend blend in the sense of communicating and connecting, but still being ourselves. All these things are important in helping all of our peers, all of the women and all the girls through the ages know that they can be who they are, respect themselves, and in that is really respecting what is expected of all of us. So, well, Miss Sweetie, would you like to add something to this conversation at this time?
You know, part of what I love about all of us is that we brought up the conversation that we didn't particularly see our peers making a conversation difference about us being different. You know, I find that to be very true. When I go into classrooms, whether it's a pre-kinder classroom or a fifth grade classroom or a high school classroom or my college kids or postgrads, I can immediately say, who's the best artist? Who's the fastest runner? Who knows how to tell a story? And they'll point immediately to whoever that person is. And one of the things that I encourage the teachers and educators I work with is stop trying to not call what is the truth. Because kids know if someone's having a reading problem. Kids know if someone reads really fast. It's not a matter of what it is. It's about being okay with it. If so-and-so has dyslexia, it's not about saying, oh, we don't want to say she has dyslexia. We want to provide methodologies to include that person in the learning so that they're just a learner. You know, we can't change some things. I couldn't change the fact that I was low vision growing up. Glasses just didn't cure the problems I had. That's not something anyone could feel bad about. It's just what it is. And so we had to work from a different perspective. And likewise, I couldn't help that I could work really fast either. I said in a post earlier this week that one of the things I learned early on was not to finish work visually, because if a teacher, if a principal, if a classmate saw that I finished in the amount of time I could finish, I either got more of the same, or by the time I was in third grade, I got put to work. And the put to work may be tutoring, as our other friends talked about. For me, I was artistic. So my husband and my father laughed a lot of years later to say that I cut, colored, and pasted my way through elementary, high school, and college. It's absolutely the truth. At that time, overhead projectors and opaque projectors were rare. A school might have one or two for a whole district, but I could draw freehand. And for years and years and years, I was copying Hallmark characters of the Betsy Ross group and all that stuff into bulletin boards, because in that time we didn't have electronic whiteboards. We didn't have electronic digitalization on the walls at school. We created characters and incentive plans out of cardboard colored paper on something we called bulletin boards. And so much of my childhood, school time, was not doing academics. I probably didn't spend an hour and 10 minutes a day doing academics, and I spent another 4.5 hours cut, coloring, and pasting and putting up rickrack around bulletin boards. But you know, that was a different kind of skill for me too, because I learned to complete things. I learned time management. I learned to keep up with those papers I finished early. I learned early on how to work with other people who didn't learn the way I did. And I think I figured it out by second grade that, you know, the way we learn really matters. I remember a child in my second grade classroom who just wasn't doing well at all academically, and it was because she couldn't see like I couldn't see. So when I could sit next to her and I could ask her the questions and tell her the definitions out loud, she memorized like crazy, and then she would take that memorization into true learning. And so I learned really early on. I remember thinking really early on that you just have to figure out how they learn. If you figure out how someone learns, then everyone can learn. And that was a very empowering thing to think as a gifted girl. One of the messages I want to share with other gifted girls is however you learn is the way you learn. And there's nothing good, bad, wrong, or right about that. It's okay to embrace that you learn quickly or easily. Or it's okay to embrace that you drop balls a lot because you learn too fast sometimes and you don't get the modules in order. And so as soon as you become aware of that, then you can protect yourself and the processes more by understanding that that's one of the fallouts from being a fast, quick study. Sometimes we just need to be able to say to gifted girls, it's okay to expect a lot of yourself because you can do. And sometimes it's just as important to say you don't have to do just because you can do. I think it's so important that we're sending messages of health, as Gail Roddy would say, you know, wellspring of living, choosing paths and choosing methods and choosing activities that agree to a whole health life, not just a mentally healthy life or a physically healthy life or financially healthy life, but a wellspring of living where you enjoy your life, when you have a well-lived life, as I like to say. Sarah, you have a child who is getting ready to go to college, and it's such an important time as she makes decisions and has hard choices before her of what to turn down and what to embrace. What are the things that you see as girls transition to college? I have a young girl in college as well. What are the transitions that you're experiencing with your daughter, and I'll share some again later with what we've shared with ours, as she faces other girls who may not think it's cool to be bright, who may not encourage her to believe that that's a smart path for a young lady to be?
Well, you know, some of the things that we've talked about are protecting her head and heart and allowing her, we've talked a lot about when she goes to school, you know, how she's going to protect her study time and her rest time and those kinds of things, because she is bright, and but she also requires, and she also requires, you know, sleep and rest. And sometimes when kids go off to school, girls or guys, they just want to play. You know, it's their first time being away from parents, and they just want to play. So, you know, really thinking about, does she want a private room when she goes? Does she want to be in a place where she is with a lot of girls, or does she want just a few girls? And looking at all the different aspects of mental, physical, social, you know, economical, all the different things that need to be considered for college. We're talking about those things, as well as what the other girls are going to think. She's going to school a year younger than most, you know, most kids are going to school. All of her peers are older than her because she's a year ahead in school. And so there is that concern as well. What will that look like when she's with, you know, other people that are older than her, and the dating scene as well, because it's, you know, often when you go to college, people are dating more. So there's a lot of things that we've discussed, and she pretty much holds her own when it comes to wanting to be doing her best and wanting to surround herself with other people who do their best. So I think as far as educationally, it'll be fine, because she'll be in classes that will be suited to other people who want to study as well. But as far as being in dorms or in an apartment and with other people her age that are actually older than her but may not have the same educational goals, that's going to be something that she's going to have to emotionally prepare herself for. And I'm not really sure, honestly, how to do that without experiencing it. You know, you can talk through it all you want to, but until you jump in and experience it and learn to deal with life as it comes, you know, there's some things that will just have to happen. So what about you, sweetie?
I want to go back to that for just a minute, because our girls are both facing that pretty much at college age and going to school at college. And my child was homeschooled, as yours was, for a lot of the time, and then public school part of the time. But I really want to point out that the phenomenon of gifted girls is we're losing our gifted girls by age 9 now. That the public opinion, Facebook, reality TV says that it's not safe for you socially to be smart by the time you're 9. Statistics in math and science say that our girls are their best and their brightest going into 3rd grade, and they purposefully disengage by 5th grade for social approval. So we have some very serious messages being sent to us societally about our gifted girls. And we have also pulled back funding and pulled back programming for gifted girls, and identification often doesn't even happen until 3rd grade in many states, and then we're losing them by 5th grade. So the messages that we're talking about, the messages that we're saying to our own daughters, the messages that we engage in community actions, the messages we do as we mentor young children really matter in the gifted girl realm, because the concept right now is what you approve of in front of me is more important than my long-term life. And so whether that's clothes or fashion or physical view of their body or their ability to think differently than their peers, or what's set before them as the example. You know, I grew up in a town where it was truly put to us that we were either going to be a wife, a mother, a nurse, or a truck driver or logger's wife, or a spinster. That was pretty much the example of this choices. You might teach piano if you were a nice enough married lady. But there was not a lot of realities of you could be an engineer, an astronaut, a doctor, or whatever. Thankfully, in my world, I had already had family members who had become attorneys and doctors and physicists or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with being a housewife either, by the way. That's a very important role in society and in our families. But to not have any perspective that there's a reason you learn math, that there's a reason that you learn to write, that there's the joy of expressing, and there's also the competence to know how to make decisions and to be able to check against your budget or to decide how to spend your finances. Those are great reasons to know math. But it's also a great reason to know math to learn to build computer programs. It's also a great reason to know science to create cures for cancer. There's just so much more perspective, and I think that's my point, that gifted girls need us all to plug in and hear their perspective. First of all, to listen. They need someone who's listening to what they're thinking and what they're saying to themselves, because that's the first awareness, is hearing them. And then second of all, after that listening, to reflect back to them what you're hearing and maybe enlarge a little bit of something that they could perceive. Or perhaps that they have a misconception. Maybe they think that the reason they're not popular is because they're smart. Or maybe and it could be that they're missing some social skills there. Maybe they're not popular because people are intimidated by them. Maybe they're not popular because they don't have the social skills of greeting back with you hello when someone says hello. There are just so many factors that have to do with how people engage with us that may just simply not be identified as part of what needs to be worked on. There are very few times when I go into gifted classrooms or when I work with populations of gifted kids that social skills are not more immature than the average bear of that age. It seems to be especially true in the elementary years that their fine motor skills and their social adaptable skills are often very much behind their classmates, even though their academics may be 2 years ahead or 3 years ahead of their classmates. And so there's also a dichotomy that happens when little children have great verbal ability, but they don't have hand control or they don't have the functional ability to make things happen that they can perceive. And so as we're speaking to gifted girls, part of that's also knowing where the safety boundaries are. Just because you can do something doesn't mean it's your job to do. I was answering the phone from the hospital for my father, who's a doctor, and making a determination by age 8 whether he should be awoken to go to an emergency room or to go to the hospital to answer the nurse's call. It was a perfectly normal thing for me. But looking back as a 51-year-old saying, what were we thinking to have an 8-year-old trained to decide when or not it was time to wake up the doctor? Doesn't mean I wasn't capable of it, but the responsibility probably shouldn't have been mine. And that's one of the conversations we need to have regularly with gifted girls, is they overtake responsibility and they take blame a lot of the time that's not theirs for things that aren't working in their world. And so we need to listen. We need to listen to our daughters. We need to listen to our neighbors. We need to listen to the gifted girls in our community, because they do carry the weight of the world very often, and they often are in isolation because they think everyone thinks like they do. We're about out of time today. What's the one thing you do as a gifted girl to survive the stress of being a gifted girl? Let's do a quick popcorn around and then let's get ready to jump out because we have about a minute left. Bobby, what's one of your things that you do to find stress relief from the days that it's just overwhelming to be gifted?
I think probably those new coloring books that are out for adults. I've always had children's coloring books around, but I think that whenever I just really get overwhelmed and I'm just totally stressed out, doing something that's very bright and colorful and creative is what's best for me. Gail, how about you?
That can work for me sometimes, Bobby. That's true. Coloring or even just writing free thought. But for me, I've said this many times before, taking a nap. I have to actually go disengage my conscious mind from the world to refresh myself, even if it's 15 or 20 minutes. That works well for me. Let's see, Dr. Edith.
Well, my one thing, I guess, would be that, especially right now, is that I need my 10-minute walk. But my 10-minute walk can be either just fast, brisk walking, but I really enjoy just taking the phone and taking pictures. I'm not a photographer, but just taking that time then to notice the little details that are around me as I go clears my mind, like Gail was saying, so that I'm reconnecting with the moment and being able then to be more creative. And you, Miss Sweetie?
Thanks again, Dr. E. For me, it's about music, and it's about listening to music or changing the tone of my day through music. I have what I call traveling music. I have what I call working music, and when I'm writing and working on large strategy plans, I have traveling music. It's music that absolutely keeps me zoning in and releases the stress of whatever's before me. But I just encourage each of us to just step away. Step away from your desk. Step away outside. Step away into a book. Step away from situations that are helping you feel full of stress because of whatever it is. Talk to somebody. The number one way that I personally get relief is to talk it out with someone, to run it by a friend that's a trusted person and say, does this sound right to you, or am I just over-focused on the situation or over-focused on me? Is this a lot? Every time I can promise you with the girls in this group, for sure, they're like, yeah, that's a lot. Just stop a while. Because they're always encouraging me to slow down and to do less and to take care of myself more. And we all need those cheerleaders in our life. Our time is up this week for Between Us Girls. Thank you so much for coming to us, whether you came live or whether you're watching later on the archive. At darewhimsy.com on Thursdays, each of us as writers bring in a specific conversation about raising gifted girls or whatever the topic is that week and what we call the sister post. We invite you to share a few words with us in the comments and to follow us home to our websites or to leave comments so that we can follow you home to yours. None of us are gurus or experts. We simply are professionals and personals who come into the space to share community about being a gifted and creative woman. We hope that you'll join us each Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time live, or to come to the archives later in the day, or to our Facebook wall at facebook.com/DearWhimsy. Thanks you so much, ladies, for being with us today. I appreciate you being here and joining in the conversation. I look forward to our next week's conversation as well. Have a great week, everyone, and I'll see you next week.